Henry Ford was born in 1863, at a time when the world still moved slowly. Most people lived by the sun, the seasons, and the land. Nights were dark, roads were rough, machines were rare, and electricity was almost unknown. Henry Ford grew up on a farm in Michigan, where life was hard and repetitive. From a young age, he disliked farm work. He did not enjoy following nature's rules. He wanted to change them. While others accepted the world as it was, Henry wanted to redesign it. He was fascinated by machines, gears, and engines. He believed that if something could be built, it could be improved. This belief stayed with him for the rest of his life. As Henry grew older, his obsession with machines became stronger. He worked as a mechanic and spent long nights experimenting. Many people laughed at him. They said his ideas were useless and unrealistic. But Henry Ford was stubborn. He believed failure was not the end, only a lesson. When he married Clara Bryant, he found something rare, someone who believed in him even when no one else did. Clara supported Henry emotionally and financially. She stood by him during years of failure. Without her belief, Henry Ford might never have succeeded. Eventually, Henry Ford changed the world. He did not invent the car, but he changed how cars were made. Before Ford, cars were expensive and rare. Only rich people could afford them. Henry Ford introduced the moving assembly line. This allowed cars to be built faster, cheaper, and in large numbers. The Model T became a symbol of freedom. Ordinary people could now travel farther, work better jobs, and live differently. America changed forever. Roads expanded, cities grew, life became faster. Henry Ford became one of the most powerful industrialists in history. But with success came control. Henry Ford did not just want to build cars. He wanted to control the entire system, how cars were made, how workers lived, how communities functioned, and even how nature behaved. He believed independence was strength. He did not like relying on others. He distrusted banks, governments, and outside systems. This mindset shaped everything he built, including his home. Fairlane was not just a mansion, it was a statement. Built along the Rouge River in Dearborn, Michigan, Fairlane was Henry Ford's personal world. It had over 50 rooms, massive gardens, private roads, and its own power plant. Henry Ford wanted Fairlane to be completely self-sufficient. The estate produced its own electricity using water from the Rouge River. It had its own heating, farming areas, and systems that allowed it to function without help from the outside world. Ford believed this was the future, not dependence, but total independence. Fairlane reflected Henry Ford's personality perfectly. It was grand, but practical, beautiful, but controlled. Everything had a purpose. The house was designed to work like a machine. Ford did not like waste. He believed efficiency was moral. To him, disorder was failure. Nature was something to be managed, not respected. The Rouge River was not just a river, it was a power source. Trees were not just trees, they were materials. Even people at times were treated like parts of a larger system. Despite his success, Henry Ford was a complicated man. He held strong opinions and refused to change them. He distrusted modern finance, even as he created modern industry. He rejected some technologies while promoting others. He admired rural life, but built massive factories. These contradictions followed him throughout his life, and they were built into Fairlane itself. As Henry Ford aged, the world around him changed. New companies rose, new leaders emerged, technology advanced faster than even he could control. His son, Edsel Ford, represented a different vision, more modern, more artistic, more open to change. But Henry struggled to let go. Control was his identity. Losing control felt like failure. Fairlane remained his refuge. It was where he felt safe, where systems worked as he designed them, where the river obeyed him. Or so he believed. Fair Lane was more than a home. It was Henry Ford's philosophy, made of stone, steel, and water. Designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright's associates, and landscaped by Jens Jensen, the estate blended nature with control. On the surface, it looked peaceful and natural. But underneath, everything was planned. Paths were placed carefully. Water flowed where it was allowed. Power was generated on Ford's terms. Fair Lane was nature, but corrected, improved, controlled. Henry Ford believed the future belonged to systems that could stand alone. This belief came from his deep fear of uncertainty. He had lived through economic crashes, labor strikes, wars, and social change. To him, independence meant safety. If you controlled your own power, your own food, your own systems, then no one could threaten you. Fair Lane was the physical form of that belief. The hydroelectric plant on the Rouge River was the heart of the estate. It provided electricity not only to the mansion, but to nearby buildings as well. For decades, it worked perfectly. It became a symbol of Ford's genius. Water flowed, turbines turned, lights stayed on. It proved in Ford's mind that man could master nature completely. But nature is patient. As years passed, Henry Ford grew older and weaker. His health declined. His influence faded. The world no longer waited for him. Edsel Ford died in 1943, which deeply affected Henry. Losing his son broke something inside him. Control slipped away, not just from his company, but from his life. He became isolated, bitter, and fragile. Then came April 1947. Heavy rains caused the Rouge River to swell. Water levels rose higher than expected. The systems Henry Ford trusted were pushed beyond their limits. Floodwaters rushed toward the hydroelectric plant. Turbines failed. Power shut down. The estate went dark. Inside Fair Lane, servants lit candles and oil lamps. The house returned to a time before electricity, before machines, before Henry Ford changed the world. Upstairs, Henry Ford lay dying. The man who had powered cities was now surrounded by darkness. There is a deep symbolism in this moment. Henry Ford, who believed systems could solve everything, was undone by a force he tried to control. The river he trusted turned against him. The independence he built failed when he needed it most. Henry Ford died on April 7, 1947. His death marked the end of an era. The world moved on quickly. New technologies replaced old ones. New leaders replaced industrial kings. Fair Lane remained, but its meaning changed. It became a museum, a memory, a reminder of ambition and limits. Fair Lane teaches us something important. It shows us the danger of believing we can control everything. Systems are powerful, but they are not perfect. Nature adapts. Time moves forward. No structure, no matter how well designed, can last forever without change. Henry Ford's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness. His belief in control built an empire, but it also blinded him. He trusted systems more than people, efficiency more than flexibility, certainty more than adaptation. Fair Lane stands today as a silent witness. Its walls remember brilliance and arrogance, innovation and rigidity, hope and fear. It tells the story of a man who reshaped the world, but could not escape its forces. Today, Fair Lane is quiet. Visitors walk its halls slowly. The river flows calmly, as it always has. What remains is not power, but reflection. Fair Lane is no longer about control. It is about understanding. Henry Ford left behind more than cars and factories. He left behind questions. What is progress? What is control? How much should humans reshape the world around them? Ford believed efficiency could solve human problems. But humans are not machines. Nature is not a system that can be permanently mastered. Ford's life shows us the power of belief. His confidence changed history. Without it, modern transportation would look very different. Millions of lives were improved by affordable cars. But his life also shows the cost of refusing to change. The world evolves. Those who refuse to evolve with it are left behind. Fairlane represents the moment when belief meets reality. It is the place where Ford's philosophy succeeded and where it failed. The estate worked perfectly for decades. But when conditions changed, it could not adapt fast enough. That is the lesson. This story is not just about Henry Ford. It is about all powerful figures who believe their systems are permanent. History shows us again and again that no system is unbreakable. Empires fall, technologies age, rivers flood. Fairlane reminds us that progress must be balanced with humility, that independence must include cooperation, that control must allow room for uncertainty. Henry Ford wanted to build a world that needed nothing from the outside. In the end, the world reminded him that nothing exists alone. The Rouge River still flows. It does not remember Ford's plans. It does not care about power plants or estates. It simply moves forward, quietly, endlessly. And perhaps that is the final lesson. The future does not belong to those who try to control everything. It belongs to those who learn to adapt. To fully understand Henry Ford, it is important to look beyond his success and examine the cost of his beliefs. Ford was not just an inventor or an industrialist. He was a man who believed deeply that the world worked best when it followed strict rules. In his mind, order was good and disorder was dangerous. This way of thinking shaped not only his factories, but also his relationships, his leadership style, and his personal life. Over time, the same beliefs that helped him build an empire also caused serious damage. Inside Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford ruled with absolute authority. He did not like disagreement. He believed his ideas were correct, even when evidence suggested otherwise. Managers who questioned him were often ignored or removed. Innovation slowed when it did not come directly from Ford himself. While competitors adapted to new trends, Ford resisted change. He trusted the past more than the future. One of the clearest examples of this was his refusal to update the Model T. For years, Ford believed one car was enough for everyone. He famously said customers could have any color they wanted, as long as it was black. While this approach once worked, the world was changing. People wanted choice, comfort, and style. Other car companies listened to customers. Ford did not. This resistance hurt the company. Sales declined. Pressure grew. Eventually, Ford was forced to accept change, but only after losing ground. This pattern repeated throughout his life. Ford often accepted reality too late. His need for control also affected his workers. On the surface, Henry Ford seemed generous. He introduced the $5 workday, which doubled workers' wages at the time. Many praised him for this, but the higher pay came with strict rules. Ford expected workers to live in certain ways. His company investigated employees' personal lives, checking their homes, habits, and beliefs. Workers were rewarded for obedience, not independence. Ford believed he was improving society. He thought discipline created stability. But many workers felt watched, controlled, and pressured. This system created fear as much as loyalty. At Fairlane, this same mindset appeared again. The estate was designed to eliminate uncertainty. Every system had a backup. Every process had a rule. Ford believed this was safety. But safety built entirely on control is fragile. When something unexpected happens, rigid systems break. The flood of 1947 was unexpected. The systems Ford trusted could not adapt quickly enough. The river did what rivers do. It overflowed. In that moment, the illusion of total control disappeared. Henry Ford's later years were marked by isolation. He outlived many friends. He lost his son Edsel, who had balanced Henry's rigidity with creativity and empathy. After Edsel's death, Ford became more withdrawn. Decisions became slower. Mistakes increased. The man who once shaped the future struggled to accept the present. Fair Lane, once a symbol of power, became a quiet place of retreat. It was no longer about ambition. It was about holding on. There is something deeply human in this. Many people who build great things fear losing them. Control becomes a shield against uncertainty. But the stronger the shield, the harder it becomes to move. Henry Ford's story shows that success does not protect against fear. In fact, success can amplify it. The more you build, the more you have to lose. This is why Fair Lane matters. It is not just a historical site. It is a lesson built into stone and water. It shows what happens when belief turns into rigidity, when confidence turns into refusal, when systems replace understanding. Ford wanted to create a world that could not fail. But failure is part of life. Growth requires flexibility. Progress requires listening. Today, when people walk through Fair Lane, they do not see a perfect system. They see a moment frozen in time. A reminder that even the greatest minds are limited by their beliefs. Henry Ford changed how the world moves. But in the end, the world reminded him that movement never stops. After Henry Ford's death, the world did not stop. Factories kept running. Cars kept moving. New ideas replaced old ones. The systems Ford built continued to function, but without him at the center. Over time, his presence faded, and his creations took on new meanings. Fair Lane, once the private world of one of the most powerful men in history, slowly transformed from a place of control into a place of memory. For Clara Ford, Fair Lane was never about power. It was a home. She outlived Henry by several years and remained deeply connected to the estate. Where Henry saw systems, Clara saw people. She cared about comfort, beauty, and quiet moments. In many ways, Clara represented the balance Henry struggled to achieve. She believed in him, but she did not share his obsession with control. After his death, Fair Lane felt different. Less rigid, less guarded. The machines were still there, but the pressure was gone. As decades passed, Fair Lane became a symbol rather than a system. Visitors no longer came to see innovation. They came to understand a man. The hydroelectric plant, once a sign of mastery, became a historical artifact. The river flowed freely again, no longer bound by purpose. The house stood still, while the world outside changed rapidly. This transformation mirrors what happens to all great empires. What begins as ambition becomes routine. What was once revolutionary becomes historical. Henry Ford's ideas shaped the 20th century, but the 21st century demanded something different: flexibility, collaboration, and openness to change. Fair Lane now teaches lessons that Henry Ford may never have intended. It shows that independence has limits, that control can only go so far, that systems designed by humans must coexist with forces beyond human design. The estate also tells us something about legacy. Legacy is not what you build, it is what remains useful after you are gone. Ford's cars changed transportation. His factories changed labor. But his rigid thinking serves as a warning as much as his innovation serves as inspiration. In today's world, technology moves faster than ever. Companies rise and fall in decades, not centuries. Leaders who succeed are often those who adapt, not those who dominate. Fair Lane reminds us that success without adaptability becomes fragile. He wanted to escape dependence, yet his systems depended entirely on staying unchanged. When conditions shifted, they failed. True strength, history shows, comes from the ability to bend without breaking. The Rouge River continues to flow past Fair Lane, unchanged by fame or failure. It flowed before Ford arrived, and it will flow long after memories of him fade. This quiet continuity contrasts sharply with human ambition. We build, we control, we plan, but nature moves at its own pace. Fairlane stands today not as a monument to power, but as a space for reflection. It asks visitors to think about balance between innovation and humility, ambition and acceptance, control and trust. Henry Ford believed the future could be engineered. In many ways, he was right. But the deeper truth is that the future must also be understood, respected, and allowed to change. When the machines go silent, what remains is not noise, but meaning. And that is the true legacy of Fairlane. History has a way of changing its questions over time. When Henry Ford was alive, people asked how he built his empire. They studied his factories, his machines, and his methods. They wanted to know how one man could change an entire industry. But today, the question is different. Now we ask what his life teaches us about power, responsibility, and the limits of human control. Henry Ford lived in an age that believed strongly in certainty. Science was advancing. Machines were improving. Industries were growing. Many people believed the future could be planned perfectly if the right systems were built. Ford was one of the strongest believers in this idea. He trusted structure. He trusted repetition. And for a long time, this belief brought success. But the modern world sees things differently. Today, we understand that systems must change to survive. Flexibility matters more than rigidity. Listening matters more than commanding. Adaptation matters more than perfection. When historians look back at Henry Ford, they do not see a villain or a hero. They see a warning and an inspiration at the same time. Fairlane helps us understand this balance. The estate was built to represent order. Everything had a place. Everything had a function. Nothing was left to chance. But life does not operate on fixed rules. Unexpected events shape history more than careful planning ever could. Wars, economic crashes, natural disasters, and social change ignore human design. Henry Ford believed independence meant safety. But true independence also requires connection. No system survives alone. Every system depends on something else: people, resources, trust, and time. When Ford isolated himself within his systems, he reduced his ability to respond when those systems failed. This is not a failure of intelligence, it is a failure of perspective. Power often narrows vision. The more control someone has, the harder it becomes to see beyond their own design. Ford's world worked best when it followed his rules, but the real world refused to do so. In many ways, Fairlane is a mirror. It reflects not only Henry Ford, but all leaders who believe success makes them immune to change. It reminds us that influence does not cancel uncertainty. Wealth does not cancel time. Genius does not cancel nature. Modern industries still struggle with the same problem. Companies rise quickly, dominate markets, and then collapse because they fail to adapt. Leaders cling to old ideas while the world moves on. The story repeats itself, again and again. Henry Ford's legacy survives not because he controlled everything, but because his ideas eventually evolved beyond him. The company that carries his name survived by changing, by doing what Henry himself struggled to do. Fairlane remains as a quiet symbol of this truth. When visitors stand near the river today, they often describe a strange feeling. The place feels peaceful, but heavy, calm, but thoughtful. It is not the feeling of victory. It is the feeling of understanding, a sense that something important happened here, not just historically, but philosophically. The estate teaches us that building something powerful is not the same as building something lasting. Lasting things learn how to change. Henry Ford wanted to design a future that would not need adjustment, but the future always demands it. That is life. In the end, Ford's greatest contribution may not be the car or the factory. It may be the lesson his life leaves behind. That progress without humility eventually slows, and control without flexibility eventually breaks. Fairlane does not judge Henry Ford. It simply remembers him. And memory, unlike machines, does not demand perfection. It allows complexity. That is why this story still matters. Because every generation builds its own systems. And every generation must decide whether to hold on or learn when to let go. When we look back at great figures like Henry Ford, it's easy to focus only on numbers. Cars produced, factories built, money earned, influence gained. But history is not only shaped by numbers. It's shaped by people, by emotions, by fears, hopes, and quiet moments that never appear in records or reports. To truly understand Henry Ford, we must look beneath the system he built and see the human being who lived inside it. Henry Ford was driven by a deep need for certainty. This need did not come from arrogance alone. It came from fear. He grew up in a world where life was unpredictable. Crops failed. Illness spread easily. Technology was unreliable. From a young age, Henry learned that survival depended on control. Machines made sense to him because they followed rules. People did not. As his power grew, this belief hardened. Machines became his comfort. Systems became his protection. The more uncertain the world felt, the more tightly he held on to structure. This is why change felt threatening to him, even when it was necessary. Yet Henry Ford was not without warmth. In quiet moments, he enjoyed music, nature, and simple routines. He loved walking the grounds of Fairlane. He watched the river not only as a power source, but as something calming. These moments remind us that even the most rigid minds seek peace. Clara Ford understood this side of him better than anyone. She balanced his intensity with patience. Where Henry focused on systems, Clara focused on people. She believed in comfort, stability, and kindness. She supported Henry's ambitions, but she did not share his obsession with control. In many ways, she softened the edges of his world. Edsel Ford played a similar role. He represented a future Henry struggled to accept, one built on creativity, flexibility, and emotional intelligence. Edsel understood design, aesthetics, and the importance of listening. His death was not just a personal loss for Henry. It was the loss of balance. After Edsel was gone, Henry's world became narrower. Fairlane reflects this emotional story as much as it reflects a philosophical one. It was a place of power, but also a place of retreat. It was where Henry went to escape pressure, even as he built pressure into its systems. The estate reveals a man who wanted peace, but searched for it through control. This contradiction is deeply human. Many people build routines to feel safe. Many leaders build systems to feel secure. But when those systems become rigid, they stop serving the people who built them. Henry Ford's life shows how easily protection can turn into isolation. As time passed, Ford's influence faded. The world moved into new eras of technology and leadership. His ideas, once revolutionary, became restrictive. This transition is painful for many powerful figures. Letting go feels like losing identity. Henry Ford struggled with this until the end. Yet his story is not a tragedy. It is a lesson. It reminds us that greatness does not require perfection. It requires learning. It requires listening. And sometimes, it requires stepping back. Fairlane now stands as a quiet witness to this truth. It does not celebrate dominance. It invites reflection. It encourages visitors to think not just about what was built, but why it was built. The house, the river, and the silence work together to tell a story that machines never could. A story about ambition and vulnerability, strength and fear, control, and acceptance. Henry Ford wanted to build a future that would not surprise him. But the future always does. And that is not something to fear. It is something to understand. Because progress is not only about moving forward. It is about growing wiser as we move. And that is the human story beneath the system. When all stories come to an end, they do not end with noise. They end with quiet. This is the kind of ending that belongs to Henry Ford and Fairlane. There are no engines running now, no factories calling for attention, no voices giving orders. Only the sound of the Rouge River moving gently beside the land, just as it did long before Henry Ford arrived, and just as it will long after memory fades. Henry Ford spent his entire life trying to bring order to the world. He believed disorder was the enemy of progress. He believed that if everything had a system, a process, and a clear purpose, then life could be improved forever. And in many ways, he was right. His ideas helped millions of people. They changed how the world moved, worked, and lived. Roads expanded, cities grew, distance became smaller, time felt faster. But what Henry Ford never fully accepted was that control has limits. No matter how carefully a system is built, it exists inside a larger world that cannot be commanded. Nature changes, people change, time changes everything. The future never arrives in the shape we expect. This truth is not a failure of planning, it is the nature of life itself. Fairlane now exists as proof of this quiet reality. It is not a place of power anymore. It is a place of memory. Every room holds echoes of decisions once believed to be permanent. Every window looks out on a landscape that continues without instruction. The river does not ask permission. It does not follow schedules. It does not remember success or failure. It simply moves forward. And in that movement, it teaches. Henry Ford believed progress meant mastering the world. But the deeper lesson, one learned slowly and often painfully, is that progress also means learning when not to resist. Adaptation is not weakness. Change is not defeat. Letting go is not failure. The greatest systems ever built eventually reach a moment where they must evolve or disappear. This is true for machines, companies, empires, and people. History does not punish those who fail. It moves past those who refuse to change. Henry Ford's legacy is powerful because it is incomplete. It shows both what ambition can achieve and what ambition can blind us to. He reminds us that innovation without humility becomes rigid, that strength without flexibility becomes fragile. Fairlane stands today not as a celebration, but as a conversation. It asks us to think about how we build our own lives, about the systems we trust, about the control we seek, and about the moments when holding on too tightly prevents us from moving forward. In a modern world filled with technology, automation, and constant acceleration, this lesson matters more than ever. We build faster than we reflect. We control more than we understand. We plan endlessly for the future, yet struggle to accept its uncertainty. Henry Ford wanted certainty. The river offered movement, and movement, in the end, always wins. The final truth of Fairlane is not tragic. It is peaceful. It reminds us that life does not require perfection to have meaning. It requires balance, awareness, and the courage to accept change. The lights went out at Fairlane, but the lesson remained. The machine stopped, but the story continued. The man passed, but the question stayed. And perhaps that is the most human ending of all. Because the world does not belong to those who try to control it forever. It belongs to those who learn how to live within it. Quietly, wisely, and always moving forward, like the river itself.